What's up, guys? Today we're going to be looking at the Vienna game, which is e4, e5, and now knight c3. Now, the more common move is knight f3. And if we ask ourselves, why are we playing knight c3 instead of playing knight f3? Well, then you come to the answer that knight f3 really blocks some of your pieces. This f2 pawn cannot go to f4, and this queen on d1 cannot travel to g4 or h5, for example. While if you play this move knight c3, the Vienna game, these moves are very common ideas to attack very early on the king side in the opening. And so it's a very aggressive opening where very often you're going to be playing f4, fighting for the center, and sometimes taking out your queen if needed to attack. So here black has a number of options. We'll start by looking at what happens after knight c6. Here you can continue with bishop to c4, simply developing, and if they were to copy you and play bishop c5, then suddenly already you see the benefit of this queen being able to swing around to the king side, because queen g4 is already a bit tricky. Because here if they play queen to f6, which seems like the best way to defend the pawn because it's also creating some counterattacks, but here you can play this move knight d5, which is a really interesting idea, because after queen takes f2, king to d1, it might seem very scary, but if you just notice the board for a second, there's no way that they can continue adding pressure. f1 is defended by your bishop, so there's no checkmate. The knight's defended, g2 is defended by the queen. There's just no way that they can add more pressure. However, for white, well, white already has a lot of attacking ideas. These two are the most obvious ones, but there's also an idea to win the queen. So I can show that here. For example, if they play g6, let's say, to defend from queen takes g7, you can go for this fork, and you're going to be very happy there, but even better is knight h3, attacking their queen. And after queen to d4, only move, suddenly d3 comes. A really subtle move, simply defending, but it creates a really massive threat of c3, which traps the queen. So if they go, let's say, knight to e7, trying to get their king out of the center of the board, then c3 comes, and you've won their queen, and with that, the game. And so there's just tons of threats here. The pawn, the queen, this pawn here, your rook very often also can swing over and add pressure onto f7, which is a very weak point for them, because notice your bishop and often your rook and sometimes your queen can add pressure onto f7. Now you might be asking, can they save themselves from this position? And they can. It's not very glamorous. They have to go king f8 here, and after knight h3, h5, after queen g5, queen to d4, and now after d3, bishop to e7. You can move away your queen to g3. They've made some room for their queen to get some more space, so you can't trap their queen anymore, but you're still in a wonderful position. First of all, they had to play all of those moves, and all of those were only moves. If they played any other thing, you would be totally winning. And even if they do manage to find all of these very critical continuations, you still have a really pleasant position. Notice their king is totally stranded here. At some point, a rook will probably land on f1 and cause some trouble. Also, their queen is still misplaced. You can attack it, for example, with c3, which will also allow your king to get out of the center. So c3, king c2, develop your bishop, get your rook in, and then king b1. And even though your king hasn't gotten the chance to castle, it still can be very safe here on b1. And also your queen's just really powerful. Their pieces are kind of awkward here. And so overall, there's just many good properties of the position that make this position really good for you. And so that is one thing that can happen in this queen to g4 line, but they can also just play, for example, g6, which is a much better choice for them, but it's still not perfect, because after you go queen to f3, there's some clear pressure on them. They have to go knight to f6, and what kind of happened here is that they've weakened all of these dark squares by playing this move g6, but they haven't fianchettoed their bishop, meaning all of these dark squares are not only weakened, but they're also not being controlled by black. And that could allow you in the future to play d3, get your bishop to g5, pinning their knight. Your other knight can come in and attack, and it's just very often going to be a really quick and easy way to attack. So for example here, first of all, very important, start with knight g to e2. Don't go immediately for d3 and for this pin, because then you fall into knight to d4, which is very annoying, kicking your queen back to defend, and you're just losing some time. So first, knight g to e2, very critical to defend over d4. So if they go here, you take, and then you can continue with your plan of d3 and pinning their knight. So for example, d6, you can maybe play d3 here, but I think h3 is a bit more safe just to stop any bishop to g4 ideas. But then immediately d3 comes, and then bishop to g5. And of course, they haven't played their best continuations. They have ways to solve this. You know, they could, even if they wanted, play bishop to e7 or even something like this, both looking kind of sad, but both will perhaps, you know, save them for a couple more moves. But if they go for a very natural continuation by castling and then starting a queenside attack, well, then they're already lost after bishop to g5. Their knight is, for the most part, undefendable. They have to bring their king to g7, but then knight to d5, and it's lost. But it's not only the knight. After the knight, perhaps there's going to be a fork, or if they move their queen away, even though there won't be a fork, your queen can come in. You're controlling all these dark squares here. Some checkmating ideas will appear. And so you can see that in these sort of copycat variations where they copy your pieces here, you have really nice ideas of queen to g4. The only thing I will mention, you have to be a little bit careful. If they play some random move, you know, for example, let's say they go here, and then for some reason you play d3 and then d6, you can't immediately go queen to g4 just because you're in a copycat variation. You have to make sure that it's exactly this position, because otherwise they're going to take your queen. Or similarly, if you allow them to develop their knight. So as the position changes, this move queen to g4 might be possible or it might not be. So you have to always double check whether it is possible, but specifically here, it is indeed possible and really dangerous for black, actually. And so that kind of happens after knight c6, but they can also go for knight f6, which I'm sure you guys realize is very common, because you're controlling the light squares. Well, now they're going to fight for them too. Now here, there's a number of ways you can approach this position, but f4 is definitely the most in the style of the Vienna game. You could also just go and develop your bishop, maybe then develop your knight and castle. That's totally fine, but f4 is really aggressive and a really fun line. Now, I've made an entire video on this gambit. It's called the Vienna Gambit, so I'll link it down below. So make sure you check it out, because it's a very important part of the Vienna game. If you want to have this as your repertoire, you need to know this move f4. But just kind of quickly to summarize it, if they were to take the pawn, you push e5. Their knight has no squares moving forward. They have to go back to their starting position. Then you develop your pieces, you control the center, and eventually castle, get your rook onto this open f-file, and with the help of your bishop very often, you're going to have some really fun attacking ideas on f7. And if they don't take it and they go for a very passive setup, then you can just leave the tension here, develop your knight, develop your bishop, and if they were to ever take, then you can continue as if they were to take early on. And the final thing to understand, even if they take, it is technically a gambit, because there's no immediate way to win it back, but you're very often going to win it back very quickly, because once you expand in the center, notice that this bishop here on c1 is going to attack it, and they're going to have to make some very committal choices if they want to defend it, which are not going to be good choices for them to make. And so if you are interested in this line more, which I recommend you should kind of research this a bit more, then one great way is indeed to watch the video I made it, where I go in a lot more depth in all of their lines. And I'll link that in the description. But let's move on to another variation, which is bishop to b4 here, which I've seen happen a number of times. They're attacking your knight, and now you can play knight d5, centralizing your knight, attacking their bishop. They defend their bishop, you develop your bishop, and eventually you can kick away their bishop and play this move d3, holding everything in the center, very nice move, also looking to develop your bishop. And if they continue with knight f6, you can play b4, and then you can pin their knight. They go bishop to e6. You can even just take here. They have to take with their pawn, and now after queen f3, you already have some pressure here on the king side. But the Vienna is not only an opening where you attack on the king side. If they were to castle, then yes, you start launching your pawns on the king side, moving all your pieces there. But as you can see here, it seems much more safe for them to castle long, but even then, they're going to run into some problems. So here they kind of have to take your knight, otherwise this pawn will be lost. And now queen to e7, they look to castle long, but you can already tell with these pawns here, it's not going to be that easy for them to hold this position. So already you can castle short, and then a5, and then b5, sacking again here, but if they were to take, their knight is lost. So they play queen to d7, trying to hold everything, but then you take king to b8, because if they were to take, they get into this nasty pin here, and that's not very good for them. So the best is king to b8, trying to use this pawn as a shelter, but then rook to a6 comes, you attack their knight, bishop to b6, and now knight c1, which I think is a really interesting move here, because it seems very awkward. You're kind of cutting your own rook, but the idea is to very quickly reroute this knight in a number of ways over to the king side, and that's kind of the only way to move this knight over to the king side. It can try also to do some things here on this very nice f5 square, but you're clearly wanting to attack here on the king, so moving the knight over to the king side seems really, really fun here. And you can see actually after king takes b7, knight to a2, and after they take, suddenly you can take here and then fork their queen. So a really nice tactical idea. And from here it's already game over. But I'll still kind of go over the technique to winning an endgame like this, because even though this doesn't really relate to the Vienna game anymore, I think this endgame is actually just quite interesting, because materially speaking, you're up, but it's not that much up, and they could have some ideas of attacking you. And so the thing you want to do in this type of position is to really weaken all of their pawn structure. And so here, d4, a really strong move that you can play in this position. And the idea is you're giving them a pawn, sure, but then you can play queen to d5, then you can play e5, again, weakening. If they take, you win their bishop, and so they can't really take. Let's say they go rook to f7 in this position, trying to stack rooks, but then you can play queen to e4, trying to take with a discovery, and if they were to stack, you take and you activate your other rook. Because in this original position, before we played all of these pawn moves in the center, notice you couldn't really activate your rook. It could come to this open file, but it's not doing anything. a8 is defended, a7 and a5 are also, and on a6 it's not really doing anything. I mean, you can maybe sack in some lines, but it's not that appealing to you. And so in a position like this, it might seem a bit hard to really make anything of this advantage, but just open up the center, even if it means giving away a pawn, because you're ultimately going to weaken their structure so much and be able to activate your rook. And so I quickly just wanted to talk a little bit about this endgame, because I thought it was quite interesting. Now, let's move all the way back here and look at one final move that they can play here, which is f5. Not a particularly great move, but they kind of try to gambit your own gambit, because typically you play f4, but this time they're giving away a pawn. Now here you can simply take the pawn. Now they're going to continue with knight f6. Why? Because if they were to try to immediately control the center and take, then you have this move queen h5. So they have to defend against queen h5, but then you can play g4, looking to misplace their knight here. And after you get in g5, their knight has to move. You can play queen to h5 check. Their king has to move. You can play f6 check, takes. You actually can first take their knight in the center, but ultimately get their king to a really awkward square. Queen, king together on the same line. Bam, queen h4. You win the queen. And even if they don't take, this pawn super strong. It can push forward. You can get other pieces. If they go into these light squares, you can get other pieces into the game. Super easy position to play. But I thought I should mention it, because I did see on some databases that f5 was a move in some cases that white actually struggled against, but I just want to quickly explain why you really should not fear it, because after you take this queen h5 idea, this g4, g5 idea is going to win you the game. So hopefully you guys enjoyed this video. I think this move knight c3 is definitely not used as much as it should, because it's a really powerful move, especially if you're an aggressive player, if you want to attack really early on with your f pawn and your queen. This is a really great choice for you. So thank you for watching this video. Hopefully you guys enjoyed. Subscribe if you're new around here, and I'll see you next time. Peace out.